Hello Mayhem Makers, I'm Mindy with Quilting Mayhem and welcome to the first week of sewing for our Beyond Squares sew along. We're going to be working on block 1, which is the center block of the medallion. So what I like to do is make sure I have all my pieces I'm going to need. I lay them out on my board. So 3.5 by 6.5 rectangle, some 3.5 squares, 4.5 inch squares that are going to make our half square triangles, and then our 3.5 inch squares that are in the corners of that medallion. Now remember, if you're doing different kits, different colors, your own fabrics, they're all going to be different than what I'm working with. I'm just going to show you based on my blocks. So this is what I would call my background, and then I have my dark and my medium that are what we're using for this center block. So I may not match you exactly, but don't worry, in the end, all our blocks are going to look the same. What's nice for this block, it's pretty easy. We're doing what I call a traditional flying geese block, and then a basic half square triangle block using a method of drawing a line, sewing a 1/4 inch seam on either side of it, cutting it, and you end up with 2 with each square you make. So we'll start with marking our fabrics, and we're gonna actually kind of go to an above shot so you watch what I'm doing. So give me a moment and we'll go to that so you can see how I mark and sew. So as you can see, we're going to take our dark squares that are for our flying geese and draw a diagonal line with your preferred marking tool. I'm using a sew line, the pink marker, and this is working pretty well on the dark fabric. I like how it shows up. Another option that I've used is the Clover, the white marking pen. This thing's been around for a while, and it will do a white line. Takes a little while for that line to show up, and then this is a heat erase, where the pink is a water erase. It depends. I just like playing around with different ones, see what I like best. And then for our half square triangle units, I'm going to use my friction, just one of the colors, so this is a navy blue, and draw a diagonal line on those so that when I go to my machine, I can just sew all my units at the same time. I like to chain piece as I go and just sew everything and then cut and trim and then press each time, as opposed to doing one piece at a time. Some of that will become personal preference for you. If you're new, absolutely do one at a time. Start with one unit, sew it, cut it, press it, and come back and do the next piece if that's what you're comfortable with, until you can gain some confidence. Once you're a confident quilter, absolutely you can sit there and do like I do. I can get all these pieces ready. I'm just laying them. What's nice with batiks is there's really no what you would call right sides. So you lay them right sides together, and I just kind of line them up and get ready to make my flying geese units. And so we're making 4 of these units for this block. So I'm going to have 4 ready. I have my machine ready with my 1/4 inch foot and thread all good to go. I just use a neutral thread. I'm going to sew on this line. I will then take it and trim it. This is the one thing I like about Creative Grids, and I like this little one. It's easier to use on my mat that I have next to my machine. It actually, I don't know if you can tell, has this 1/4 inch marking. So once I sew it, I lay this dashed line on my sew line and trim my 1/4 inch off and press it. I will take this to machine, do those steps, and I'll show you how it looks once it's done so you get the idea, and then we'll show you what's next. So I'm gonna go get the first half of my flying geese ready for you. I'll be right back. So as you can see, we have the first half of our traditional flying geese unit done. I call this traditional because this is the first way I learned how to do a flying geese block, and there are multiple ways to do it. But when you're doing them in small amounts, so like these, we're only doing 4, I still like this traditional method. It's still my favorite. There's a little bit of waste, but I prefer it. I always seem to have better success. I have pressed my seam open here, and I do seem to have better success. You can, if you have a preference of pressing one way or the other, As we say in Star Wars, you go to the dark side, so I will press to the dark side if I need to do that method of pressing. But for flying geese, I still find I succeed in getting a better point. I do better at getting my 1/4 inch at the top when I actually press my seams open. I get less bulk here by flattening out my seam. So the next step you're going to do is just put your other square on. I'm going to sew on this line and do the same: trim, press open, just repeat. And I'll do that for all 4 units, and then we'll come back and show you how they turn out. So here is our completed flying geese blocks. As you can see, I have my nice 1/4 inch spacing, and then I want to make sure that this rectangle is still 3.5 by 6.5 when I'm done. What's nice with also this little creative grid ruler is it has my little crosshairs for the top of my flying goose block, and it actually happens to be 3.5 by 6.5. So should I have a little extra, I would need to trim it off. But these are really pretty much dead on. So make sure you trim. Trimming is important. I do hear from some of you that you don't trim your blocks, and it just scares me. If you want a nice, consistent, finished product, definitely trim as you go. Make sure they're all consistent, because every little smidge that is off, it just kind of keeps compounding in your blocks. So definitely check and do any trimming if necessary. So we're done with those. I'm going to put them over here. It's waiting to go with that unit. We're going to now do our half square triangles. So this method, I like this one. It's pretty simple. You cut your block bigger than the size you want it to finish at. You draw your diagonal line, as I have here. If this was printed fabric, you would have them right sides together, but it's batik, so you can do what you want. I'm going to sew 1/4 inch on either side of this line, and then when I'm done, I will cut on this line. So I will sew my seams, and then I'll show you what it looks like before I cut it and press it. So I'll be right back. So hopefully you can see here, I have my seams 1/4 inch from either side of this line. I'm going to take my ruler, and I'm just going to line it up, cut on my line, break these apart, close my rotary cutter. I'm going to press them open, and then, as I said, trimming is important. You want to make sure that they measure correctly, and with this method, usually I find that these come out a little bigger than they need to be, which is what I want, so I can trim down. So I'm going to go iron, we'll trim them to 3.5, and then I'll show you how this block is going to lay out before we sew it all together. So I'll be right back. All right, so we have half square triangle squares. We're going to trim it up. So it needs to be 3.5 when we're done. As you can tell, like I said, it was going to be bigger than we needed. Here's how you trim. Is we have our diagonal line. 3.5 is what we're going to finish at. So I'm making sure that the diagonal line goes from one end of the 3.5 square to the other. I have plenty of room to move. I could come all the way down here, or I could move up here. I'm just going to do right smack in the middle and then trim. So I do 2 sides, and having a nice sharp blade is very helpful to make sure I don't worry about having to cut more than twice. And I have my diagonal lined up again. I have it on my 3.5, and we trim. So we're going to repeat and just keep doing this through all our blocks. All right, so now we have all our parts ready. I'm going to show you how one block will be laid out. So place your half square triangles so they make this square design. Take your geese and surround it. And then your little setting squares will go in the corner. How I'm going to assemble all of this is I will be taking and sewing this unit together. Sew these, press them open, sew it all together so this is a center. I'll be sewing these squares onto my geese, and then these geese will be onto the center square and so on. So we'll show you in kind of a brief session as we go what they'll look like. I'm going to start with the center, so I'll be right back. All right, so here's what that center unit's going to look like, and now I'm just going to keep adding pieces to this block. I'm going to do these squares next on my little flying geese, and I actually can do this flying goose onto that square, and I'm just going to keep going. We'll be right back. All right, so as you can see now, I have kind of what I've assembled as rows. So I worked right to left. I got all three pieces sewn together, and now I'm just going to work top to bottom, and I'll have a finished block. So start here. I do line up my seams. I'm going to find my pins. I will pin and match all my seams so they stay where they belong as I sew, and I don't have to worry about shifting. I'll put both sides on, and we'll be back. We'll show you what the finished product looks like. So, all right, so here we have our block all the way together. As you see, I've got most of my points. Some could have been a little better, but you know what? It's done, it looks good. It definitely will look good from a distance. And this is the center of the beginning of your quilt. So this is all you need to do until next week when we go to our next couple blocks. So get to it. If you have any questions, absolutely reach out to me at the shop at Quilting Mayhem, or you can email me, Mindy at quiltingmayhem.com. Either way, definitely don't be afraid if you have any questions or problems. Reach out to me. I'll gladly help you. Otherwise, we'll see you next week for more steps. Happy stitching.